You say, well, wait a second. The book of Daniel, Jews in exile, how did they receive atonement? If the temple wasn't standing, there were no blood sacrifices, how did they receive atonement? Number one, there was no national atonement. They were under judgment. There was no assurance of atonement for the nation, no national assurance of atonement while they were in exile because they were under judgment and discipline by God and the temple had been destroyed. We talked about that in the previous lecture looking at 2 Chronicles, the 7th chapter. Could individuals appeal for mercy? Of course. Could they receive atonement? Of course, you say, but there weren't blood sacrifices. There's more. Daniel receives revelation. And by this time, revelation had been given through other prophets about the suffering servant, about the fact that atonement would come through the death and suffering of the righteous one, that God would bring about the expiation and the bringing in of righteousness through the servant of the Lord and through the vision that Daniel has in the 9th chapter. In other words, God is already informing them of how atonement will ultimately be made. And they simply had to believe the message. Now, I'm not saying that every Israelite understood this, that they now said, oh, the Messiah is going to come and make atonement for our sins. No. I'm not hinting that this was some national understanding. What I'm saying is that God was revealing another aspect to atonement with the temple destroyed. And, let's take this further. Ultimately, some of the rabbis said that God forgave sin through the temple sacrifice. He was actually looking at the blood of Isaac. The New Testament teaches us that when God forgave sin, he did it ultimately on the fact that Messiah was going to die. In other words, he saw and foreordained before the world was created that the Messiah would die and pay for the sins of the world. And by paying for the sins of the world, God could forgive before the Messiah came, looking forward to what he was going to do, and after Messiah. So the blood sacrifices had a purpose, but they could not totally do what the blood of Yeshua did. They could point towards and have a certain outward role of cleansing, but ultimately when God forgave, he forgave based on what Yeshua did.